Welcome to Myths of Midgard. This podcast offers a scholarly lens on Norse myth and Viking Age Scandinavia. We'll discuss source materials like the Eddas, sagas, poetry, and more, making them accessible to all, from scholars to modern pagans to curious minds. Join us in unraveling the tales of gods, giants, and heroes. Man your oars and let's set sail. Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to Myths of Midgard, the podcast where we journey into the enchanting world of Norse myth. I'm your host, Ryan Eckerson, and I'm really excited to embark on this epic adventure with you. Before we dive headfirst into the discussions and into the future podcasts, I thought it'd be a good idea to introduce myself and to create an introduction podcast just to share a bit about my background, what brought me to this fascinating subject, and a little bit of what I have in store for you guys in the future. So, I am Ryan. I was born and raised in Tennessee in the United States. I hold a degree, a bachelor's degree in linguistics from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And my career has taken me on quite the winding path. Because shortly after graduating from the University of Tennessee, I was in U.S. Army flight school and learned to fly the Apache helicopter, and was in the Army for quite some time. I was in the Army from 2014 to 2022. And during that time, my fascination with Norse myth grew. It started off as a small seed, just like Yggdrasil, and sprouted and grew into the fabulous, tree that I think it is today. Maybe it's more of a sapling. There's still a lot that I need to learn and can learn, but I think the same can be said for any scholar in the field. So toward the beginning of my time in the Army, I started noticing crows before I would fly. Where I was learning to fly was Dothan, Alabama, sort of that area. If you're familiar with Fort Rucker, Alabama, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so there's really not any ravens, but there were crows, and that was close enough for me. And before I would fly in the mornings, I would walk up to the helicopter, and I would notice a crow or two always sitting on a light post, kind of on the hill that I'd have to walk up at Hanchy Army Airfield. And it started off a bit as a joke. I would look at the crow and say, "Hello, Odin," thinking that somehow this crow would take the message back to the Norse god Odin. And really, I didn't even think that. It was more of just something that it was just something that I did. It started off as sort of a little joke. But I was a younger guy at the time, and I was looking for a sense of purpose, and I had felt a little bit lost at that point in my life. It was a big transition going into the Army and then going into flight school, and there was a lot of responsibility and a lot put on me. And there were times where I began to question, is this what I want to do? And so I'll never forget it. As cheesy as it sounds, I had watched the first episode of Vikings. And I remember Ragnar had looked out into the distance, and he saw Odin, and he saw these ravens. And so that's why, really, when I saw these crows, I would start saying that. I just thought, well, maybe there's something to it. And after a while, I started resonating with that, and I thought to myself, maybe I am on the right path. Maybe he is watching me and telling me that I'm on the right path, and that even though, I may be confused right now, I am meant to be here and to learn how to fly this machine. And so it really gave me a sense of purpose. And I remember throughout my years in the Army, I said that my fascination for the mythology grew. And I remember, my first duty station was in Germany. And I met some people there, my first unit, a couple of fellow soldiers that were also intrigued by the myths for varying different reasons. Some just liked the stories, or some had a Scandinavian background. Others had watched Vikings. And some were just interested in learning about something new. And so that was a good time, we would do these little ruck marches together and have little group meetings together, just things to build camaraderie, nothing that was super deeply rooted into anything scholarly or anything like that. But like I said, it started off as a seed, and so then during my time in Germany, I got the chance to go to Sweden and to Norway on a couple of missions, training exercises, and it just felt like all the pieces were aligning. It was kind of one of those, call it self-fulfilling or confirmation bias. Julius Caesar once said, man will believe what he wants, right? And so I did. I felt like, hey, this is all aligning. And I remember I had found online, shortly before my time getting out of the Army, or shortly before I got out of the Army, probably 2 years before, I found this master's in Iceland, in Viking and medieval Norse. And I said, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. That's what I feel called to do. And so I ended up resigning my commission, and I got out June of 2022. And I moved to Iceland, and I was in Iceland, boots on the ground. Well, more like tennis shoes on the ground. August of that same year, 2022, just last year. And it has been absolutely phenomenal. I've taken classes in Old Norse, what we can also call Old Icelandic. Taken classes in oral traditions of the sagas and the Eddas. Taken some medieval Scandinavian history. Right now, I'm at the University of Oslo, and I'm taking runology and Celtic mythology just to supplement my mythological hunger. And also at the University of Iceland, just to backtrack a little bit, I was also able to take a manuscripts class to learn how to read the Old Norse manuscripts, which does take a bit of skill, not just because a lot of them are very faded, but also because they would write not only in the Icelandic of the time, but in essentially abbreviations. So there's a lot to learn in this field. And so after a year and going on a year and a half of studying this now, and about to start my master's thesis and then hopefully move on to my PhD, I thought that it would be great to really compile this information and make it accessible to everyone that has the ability to listen to this podcast. For those of you new to Norse mythology, it seems like just a normal thing to go into a bookstore and pick up a book that says Norse mythology on the cover, read it from cover to cover, and to think, okay, well, that's all there is to it. And even for those who have done that, maybe multiple times, or they've tried to dig a little bit deeper, maybe they've gone online and searched through a couple of articles or things like that, maybe gone onto YouTube and watched a couple of YouTube videos. It's also easy to think, well, this is about all there is to it. And one thing that I think is really important to talk about is the reception of Norse myth. And what we see in society today directly influences how we understand the myths. Many people, their first idea of Thor, if I were to say Thor, is blonde hair, super ripped, square-looking hammer, maybe wings on a helmet, and flying around the sky. And you may think superhero. Well, that's not really the Thor of the mythology. And some of the things that we will talk about in future podcasts will show that even the people of the Viking Age and before that all had different ideas about who these gods were. Some gods were revered in certain places and maybe not so much in others, or maybe certain gods have multiple tales told about them from varying points of view, or there's different versions of the same tale out there. And we'll discuss all of that in future podcasts. I want to introduce all of you to that. And another big thing to discuss is, unlike many mainstream religions, those who practiced Norse paganism in the past, and now this is a very broad term that I am assigning, but what we generically think is Norse paganism. Those who practiced that in the past did not write it down in a codified way. There was no Bible of Norse mythology. The Poetic Edda or the Prose Edda are not Bibles in a sense. And those who read these works, the Poetic and Prose Edda or the sagas, it's very important to understand the historical things that were going on at the time. It's important to understand who is the scribe, who had this work compiled, when was it compiled, why was it compiled. And those are all things that we'll delve into in future podcasts. So I want to keep this short. It's just an introduction. Once again, I'm really, really excited that you're here. And I hope that you'll stick around for the information that's coming. If you have any requests for future episodes, please feel free to reach out and let me know what you'd like to hear. Also, please keep in mind, I'm doing all of this myself, and I'm brand new to it. Obviously, this first introductory episode was completely unscripted, save for a few notes on the side. So there's a lot of ums, a lot of crutch words, and just like right there. But that's what makes a podcast so great, is it feels a little bit more personable. And that's what I hope that this is. Because right now, it's just me sitting in front of my tiny little desk in a tiny little room in a tiny little city called Oslo, waiting to get back to the tiny little island of Iceland to finish this master's. So once again, thanks for being here. And until next time, keep reaching for more knowledge.